Hello, this is Georgina Rose.
This is Laurier.
This is Temperance.
And this is Olivia.
And welcome to Magnolias and Magic. First of all, we have a lovely guest back, Olivia, the Witch of Wonderlust. She's been on the show twice, so we're glad to have her back. But this week we're going to be talking about the idea of advanced practitioners and our obsession with them. So in the past, we've discussed what it means to be an advanced practitioner, what that means in different traditions, and how it's relative. Though, of course, we're going to rehash some of that in this episode. But what we really wanted to discuss is why people feel this pressure to be advanced. Does every person who encounters spirituality, who encounters witchcraft, need to become what is known as an advanced practitioner? I think, and I've noticed there's a lot of pressure in our community, especially in certain sectors, to become an advanced practitioner, to after a point become a teacher, become a reader, become a professional. And as well, like, there's this thing where when you start being an advanced person and teaching other people, it impacts your relationship to your practice in a really strong way. How the rise of social media and clout chasing have impacted our relationship to progress. Do you ever, like, what does it mean when you become advanced? What does that even mean? How does your practice change when you get the arbitrary label of advanced, and everything in relation to that? So let's break into it.
Olivia, this was your topic. Do you want to start us off?
Fuck, sure. I just don't know, like, where to start. I mean, okay. Advanced practitioners, like, what does that even look like nowadays? Because that is really, I think it depends on who you talk to. Because I think a lot of people would consider me advanced, and I would not consider me in that era, in that, I don't, sure, the status. That's not the word I was looking for, but that works.
Area. Is that, I don't know.
Area. Yeah. I would not consider myself advanced whatsoever. So, like, I think it just depends on who you talk to. But also, like, what does that mean to be advanced online? I think that's totally different than actually being advanced just in general, and, like, what your actual manifestations look like in your experience and what you know.
For me, I find the idea of an advanced practitioner very interesting because clearly, like, in your practice, you grow, but there's never a point when you stop practicing. In Thelema, we definitely have sort of a trajectory that people go down, a sort of path, so to speak, but you never fully reach it because no human, at least to my belief, can fully ever master and completely understand divinity to its fullest extent. It's beyond human comprehension. So the entire life of an occultist, and when we look at these big influential groundbreaking occultists, they practiced until they died. Like, there was never a point where they're like, I have unraveled all the secrets, I have understood all the mysteries, and then stop. So I find advanced is more used as a way to compare yourself to other people than a destination. I find it's used to compare where people are less than like, I have now entered the advanced status. I think it's more of a status and a relation to others and a subjective term than one that's like, after you do this ritual, you are advanced. Or at least that's what I've observed.
I think there's something to be said about you'll always be a beginner at something. You know, I've gotten more serious about certain things, but by a grand scale, I still feel like fairly in the beginner territory of astrology and definitely of Norse paganism now that I'm getting serious. If I tried to do ceremonial stuff, I'd be a total novice, newbie, beginner all over again. You know, there's always going to be things that you don't know things about, and if you start learning this new thing because you feel it's time for you to learn it, you become a beginner in that area all over again. So even if you know a lot about one thing or another, you're always going to be a novice somewhere. So being advanced is really, really relative to what specifically you're talking about doing. Because everybody, like, Georgina's not really an astrologer, but I am. I'm not a Thelemite. She is. The things that we are advanced at or beginners at is going to vary wildly. It doesn't mean that we're not experienced in some way, but, you know, advanced and beginner are super relative terms.
I think that the term advanced, like, when you really get into it, a self-descriptive term of advanced really comes from a place of ego, and a place of needing to fulfill a role in the community that you're in. And when I mean that, you know, especially online. Okay, when you're in person, when you're in an in-person community, your skill level is gauged by those around you. But when we are online, there's no one that can really say what you have or haven't learned definitively unless they know you in person. And so we have to kind of self-assess ourselves. And so that term advanced comes from an inner place of ego. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing. It's actually a pretty neutral thing to say, you know, okay, well, my ego says I'm advanced. You know, because at all points in your journey, there is something that you're going to be new at. There's something you're going to be beginning or starting or learning. There is going to be things that you would say, okay, yeah, like, you know, I'm pretty advanced. And what does advanced mean? You know, does that mean that you have the basics down and you've been studying for X amount of years and you have a dedicated patron? Or does it, you know, what does that mean? And it flows from person to person, community to community. But at the root of all that, at the base of it, if we're talking about a self-descripted status, it really is ego more than anything else.
Yeah, it really is. Well, okay, so like when people are looking up, so like when you are a beginner and you're like, yes, I'm a beginner, and you're looking up other people to learn from, would you, how do you think people, how did you gauge that in the beginning? How did you gauge, like, this book was written by somebody? Did you just assume because they wrote a book like that they're advanced enough?
Did. I mean, I was a teenager. I was a jit, okay? So
Fair.
here I was, like, with my mom in Barnes and Noble, all right? Like, picking out books in the New Age section because that's what it was. So, like, I was a kid. Like, so, of course, to me, it was like, if you wrote a book, you must be an expert, right? Like, that's how that works. And throughout my teenage years and whatnot, you know, I still kind of held that authority for written published work, especially like publishing houses where I swayed one way or the other, like I just did. And as I got older, I became more aware of the internet. So if you've listened to past episodes, we did a cult episode, you would know that I was very isolated from the internet for many, many years. And when I came back out into the world in 2011, Tumblr was just starting up. And then there was like Witch Tumblr. And I was like, none of this shit's good information. Like, none of it's good. So I spent a long time having to learn what was good, what was bad. I kind of tried to find authors that I liked. I tried to find their social medias. I never really got into YouTube, so that was not something that I vetted because I just don't like watching YouTube all that much. But yeah, I definitely and now as an adult, I recognize that not all books are equal. Not all authors are equal. Some authors will be more academic versus some will be more UPG. But as a kid, for sure, that was like it. If it was published, it's got to be good.
Oh yeah, I also started as a teenager. I thought published equals good as well. I wasn't on like YouTube or Tumblr. I used a lot of forums. So I would go on these forums, and if someone had a lot of posts or had like a special status, I always assumed that they knew more. A lot of these forums would have these like rankings. They would have like fake degrees, and like replicating like old school orders. They'd be like third degree, and so I assumed like anyone with these high numbers like clearly knew more. If someone knew like big jargon words, I was like,
They know what they're talking
But
about.
doesn't a forum just work like if you comment a lot, that's how you get your rank? Isn't that how they work?
Yeah, well, I know that now. I was dumb, okay? I also was kind of an edgelord, but I always thought like people who speak like an occultist, or as I thought mystical. I was
Pretentious.
Like if someone was, yes, I was like, the more pretentious someone speaks, clearly the more they know, which now I know is not true. But because I always looked up to these really old books, because I kind of had the fallacy in my head that like older book equals better, which I completely don't believe now. I think that's actually a horrible way of ranking things. You know, I mean, I was a kid, I didn't know better, but I certainly did things like that. I mean, I just assumed like if someone's a community member who's established, that means they're good, which now that I'm more established in the community and I know more people, I've realized that there's absolutely no way to fully know someone's practice unless you're in their head. Like, even if you see someone at events, even if you read their books, you actually don't know what their practice is, because the majority of the occult work happens internally and alone with divinity. So it's pretty hard to gauge that off of anything. So that's my slightly cynical realization. But I think in the end, like, it does all happen between you and the divine. So I mean, you can vet material. Like, you can totally vet material, you can vet content, you can see if someone's saying complete dog shit or not. But in the end, you really don't know where someone is entirely unless you're in their own head.
For me, it was a weird start. It kind of varied between platforms who I would and would not view as advanced, because, like you guys, I started as a teenager, but I had like a couple on and offs. When I had more of a bias towards books because I was raised by an academic parent, and the schooling and book learning was very, very like drilled into my head as important. So I had that bias for a long time of like published equals good. Now I obviously know that's not necessarily the case. Almost anybody can get published for anything, but books aside, social media. I was on Tumblr not for witch stuff, just to be on Tumblr to have fun since like 2009, 2010. And I already knew Tumblr well enough to know most people on here are my age. And by my age back then, that meant teenagers. And it was a very teenage driven platform, or young early 20s. So I never thought of anybody on there as being advanced, because I was like, anybody professional is not going to be on here. Anybody advanced knows Tumblr isn't worth their time because it brings no clout. Nobody can even see your follower counts. There's none of that like flaunting your numbers because there's no way to see it. So I never really took much stock in like Tumblr is law. And because of knowing that, I mostly took that same attitude over to YouTube. There's a little bit of that, like, they look pretty therefore must be good, not necessarily true, but there is more of an attraction factor to it.
Can we
because
talk
it's
about
so
that in a sec?
I
it's
had the
so hard to get through
contrarian
ugly
view.
videos.
I thought, and this is so bad, I thought anyone who was aesthetic clearly didn't know what they were talking about.
Wait,
Get out,
but let me
Olivia.
talk about that. Let me talk about that.
No.
Fuck!
Olivia.
It's coming from my throat right now. That's something that actually upsets me a lot, because I fucking love aesthetics. I love them so much, obviously, but it pisses me off because but the thing is generally, if we're like generally speaking, you're right. If they're focused more so on the aesthetics, most likely the information is going to be foundational or like not helpful, or just like regurgitated very clearly. But if it's like really ugly videos and it's like the vertical shot with their phone and they're like cooking at the same time while they're talking to you, that's usually like some of the best information that you can get, but it's just so hard to like digest because it's so dry, and there's it's a visual platform, so you don't want to watch it, and then the audio is always like garbage, so you don't want to listen to it. But the unfortunate part is like there's a lot of the time not an in between, so I completely understand why more advanced, quote unquote, right, like somebody who has been practicing and has been studying under people and like knows more than me in a lot of different aspects can look at my stuff and be like, that girl knows jack shit. I get it, because it's like all of my stuff I try to look really pretty. I try to make it look really pretty, but that's my rant.
This is currently happening right now, and I just thought of this. So, anybody who's been following me on social media knows I really like Ocean Keltoy and his whole group. Now, Ocean knows how to get the visuals down. He has, graphics that come in. He's got a nice camera, the whole thing. He has a friend called Balefeld who has, he has great information. He's a historian. I love his work. I think it's fantastic to listen to. And as like pure audio, like podcast format, great. His videos are so boring to look at. Nothing's happening. It's just him sitting on his chair for an hour plus straight. And the information is so good. And so they'll have him on sometimes, and it helps to have like the three of them and engaging and having a nice background. Like Ocean takes care of the visuals, and all of them have the good information. But Balefeld in particular, being historian, I'm just thinking of like great information, awful visuals, and I love his content, but oh my god, it's still so true.
Okay, I feel like I'm the middle ground because
Your void?
My void is not as boring as some. I haven't. Okay, look. I'm a step up visually from the shot on a potato in the back of a lecture hall. I'm a little above that tier, but I'm not in the aesthetic tier. But I speak quickly, so my videos are not an hour long. So I think that gets me a couple points. But I do think I honestly fall more to the less aesthetic, better information side of the Smash.
But here's it's not just YouTube videos, and I had to go over to my bookshelf to pull these books to kind of explain it. So these are two separate books. This first one that I'm going to show you was published in the edition that I have is from 1998. So this is kind of like the reason why I'm pulling these is because like these are my earlier books. Like I remember going to Borders like Y2K ish and like with my mom and stuff, and like the books on the shelves were like Silver Ravenwolf, Scott Cunningham, stuff like what I'm about to show you. So even outside of YouTube, outside of like that visual format, even books have been like this. So some books will get picked up while others won't. So both of these books are would have been in the New Age shelf. So here's this wonderful, you see how that's looking, the Modern Witches spellbook. This lovely like font with this lovely border here. You see it? Great, right? Now here's another all text book, which was more recently published. All black and purple, right? But if you saw both these books next to each other, you'd pick up one before you pick up the other.
Marketing is what it is. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing is like it's okay if that's not your thing, but at the end of the day, the more aesthetic something is, the more if it's on a visual platform, which is all of social media, maybe other than podcasting, it's all visual. But even podcasting, but even like your logo itself is going to be visual. Like there are plenty of witchcraft podcasts out there, but some of the logos look like garbage. So I'm going to be like, is it a good podcast though? You know?
It depends on the platform for me, but here's the difference between all of you guys being pretentious, like skill level, not skill level. I have pretty severe ADHD, and I'm not going to sit through something that's a talking, floating head with nothing else. Like, I need those B-roll clips every few seconds. Like, otherwise, I'm not staying engaged with your content. So people who know how to effectively work social media, and every platform is different, right? Like, on TikTok, the TikToks that grab my attention are the ones that do a bunch of quick little shots or that like change, like the person will change their appearance drastically between shots. I'll watch those more than anything else. Instagram, I like pictures that are clear, bright. They get the point across. I see what I'm getting. YouTube, I need that B-roll. I need some music in the background. If I don't have that, it's not an aesthetic versus not aesthetic thing. My attention's just not going to be there. It's just how I'm wired.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I think some of it is also, I like to think that we're starting to meet in the middle in a nice way, where the impression that it gives off is if you can do nice visuals and good information, it means that you're dedicated to it. So it's not just doing the research, but also putting the time in to like make a proper edit, do the color correction on your videos, to throw in the B-roll, to take to, and like B-roll doesn't have to be hard. And I think that, you know, with Olivia, for the most part, starting off that trend fully in the witchcraft space, others have started to follow in and to add some of the extra clips in, which has been nice. But there's still, you know, online content creation aside, just the visuals. Like if you can take a nice picture or you're pretty, I hate to say it, but sometimes being a pretty AFAB person gets you more attention regardless of how good your content is or how advanced you are. Some people automatically associate pretty with smart or pretty with good.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. I mean, it's the social media algorithms literally will push people it perceives as more attractive over other people. It's a cold hard truth of social media. I mean, the TikTok algorithm in particular, like
the TikTok algorithm is very specific in that it wants skinny people for the most part. So if you're thin, if you are pale or white, if you are taller, I've noticed that it pushes that. But skinny is a feature, and it's a dark underbelly of social media just in general. This is off topic to the topic, but it's a dark underbelly of like eating disorders, addictions, bad self-care, because it pushes all these like what it describes as the ideal body type, but so many people don't look like that and it's not achievable. And then if you do, I feel like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because I've seen tons of skinny people and my friends, even, like, I would not classify myself in that category, but like my friends that are like pretty thin, they'll get tons of comments about their weight, like about being too thin. And there's like not a way you can win. You're either fat or you're too skinny, and there's no in between. And it's like, social media pushes really bad narratives, and I don't know why we continue to allow it to push narratives in the spiritual world, but we do. So.
Well, the thing is, with spirituality, online exists through the framework of social media. So to be a successful online spiritualist, you have to be a successful online creator, which means you need to understand those rules and follow that. In general, that makes for not great teaching, because to succeed online and to be a good teacher are not correlated. There are some great occultists who have no platform and some horrible occultists who have large platforms. But also, aesthetic does not make content bad. Aesthetic is neutral. This is what I've noticed. There are some people with great aesthetics who have good content, some people with awful aesthetics that have good content. Those two don't necessarily correlate, but to succeed on social media, you need to be able to at least please the dear algorithm god. So, this is something that also another thing I wanted to talk about that has bothered me recently. I think on social media, a lot of people join the social media community because they're lonely and they're a solitary practitioner. But because they're on social media, feel forced to be a creator. So they become a creator when they're new because they just want community. And I think that that's kind of toxic.
And I think it also ties into we don't really get a chance to publicly practice. We don't get a chance to publicly practice. So, if you're trying to stretch your wings into the astrology sphere and you want to practice making predictions, you want to see how good your eye is and how good your learning has been, how much you've really taken in, it's it's hard to express online, especially on platforms like Twitter where you only have so many characters. It's hard to express, like, number one, this is practice. Do not take my word as gospel. If I get something wrong, feel free to correct me, but please be nice. I'm just trying to practice. Like, we can see that sort of contrasted from my other background, which is the art world, where you're allowed to post sketches and stuff you're trying out. There's not really a way so much to do that in the witchcraft and spiritual space. If you're trying out a new altar setup, if you're trying out a new type of spell work, or if you're trying out a predictive or divinatory technique, there's no good way to express in very few characters, this is for practice. And if you get something wrong because you're practicing, everybody's expecting you to be advanced because you're on social media, because you have any amount of presence at all. You get ripped apart sometimes if you get anything even remotely wrong. And we just don't allow novices to express, like, novices to a certain thing, whatever skill level you have in other things. We don't allow people to express they are a novice and just trying.
I think the ceremonial magic community is really harsh, especially towards young women. The majority of ceremonial magicians are older men. And on social media, a lot of them, when a young woman gets interested in ceremonial magic, when she's new, she's on Twitter, she starts tweeting about, like, I don't know, like some Kabbalistic correspondence or some ritual she's done. She'll have something wrong because, like, obviously they're new, they're not experts. It takes a really long time to learn ceremonial magic. And so these older men who are established will just, like, go in and, like, rip the throat. They'll be like, you got this tiny correspondence wrong, you fucking idiot. And they're really harsh because they nitpick to such a high degree when not everyone on Twitter is a teacher. Like, I get people doing that to me because I'm a creator. Like, I accept that that's part of my community. But I don't think we should do that to new practitioners. I think it's really unfair. And I think it is not typically from the spirit of correcting. I don't think they're trying to correct these people. I don't think that's their goal. I think they want to assert their knowledge and their intellectual dominance by tearing someone down. I think it has no positive motivation. I think it is malice, and I think it is just someone wanting to feel superior. And I think it's really toxic and gross.
That's not where I thought you were gonna go. I was disagreeing where I thought you were gonna go. I was gonna say that I think that actually occurs most in the tarot community, but I'm gonna circle back to the tarot community and come over to where you were describing, and that it doesn't just happen in ceremonial spaces. This phenomena that you're describing, it also happens in the eclectic space, specifically when we get people interested in witchcraft, and in an eclectic witchcraft. Most people's first stop are the '90s Wicca books. Those are pretty common first stops: Cunningham, Buckland, things of that nature. And when they get to the online sphere, they're not caught up to date on the political and social progression that the community has made over the past 30-ish years. So they'll come in with ideas about, terms that are used in those books. Black magic, white magic, those are terms used in those books. Sage, white sage is used in those books. Things of that nature that someone who has only ever read a text, they wouldn't know the social and political context of the community and the change that we've gone through over these 30 years. So when they come in, they are torn to shreds on the internet because they've, said or done this thing that is no longer acceptable. And we don't really allow for any give or take on that mistake, because it's like, oh, well, like everyone knows that you can't use white sage, blah, 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 blah. But it's like someone just coming in only ever read one or two books by Scott Cunningham. They probably don't know. There probably is a little bit benefit of the doubt there, and we don't allow for any of that benefit of the doubt. But where I thought you were going with that was that I was gonna say the kind of beginner to professional pipeline, which is where I thought you were going and you didn't, but I'm gonna go there anyways. Happens in tarot is like we see a lot of people get interested in tarot online, and then within 2 or 3 months, they're now like these professional tarot readers, like charging like whatever they're charging to do these tarot readings. And I didn't learn tarot in 2 or 3 months. Like, I read professionally. I didn't, know it in 2 or 3 months. I certainly wasn't charging for the service in 2 or 3 months. And there's this extreme, I think, pressure when people get into that section of divination where it's like they feel like they're expected to be like a professional reader, because like that's what everyone else does, right? Everyone reads tarot and they charge for their tarot readings, and that's just what you're supposed to do. And it's not what you're just supposed to do. Learn the cards, enjoy the journey, like read for yourself, read for your friends. You don't have to charge, you don't have to have a business. If you're coming into tarot with the intention of having a business, that's different, but it can just be a hobby that you enjoy.
And I've had that experience myself with the astrology stuff, where people will ask, like, as a joke, just lightheartedly, what's going on with the star stuff, and I'll talk about what's happening in the sky right now, and then I'll immediately, every single time, get people in servers saying, so when are you going to be selling readings? I can't wait until Nike opens readings. And granted, I do want to, but there's this pressure to go faster that my ADHD brain has also been like, they want you to do it. Take your time, go slower. Don't finish that class you're doing. But there's this pressure immediately. As soon as you get any amount right, any amount that sounds good, everyone around you just suddenly is like, you need to sell it. You need to monetize it. I want to buy this from you. Make it a thing that you can make money off of. And it really just, the beginner to professional pipeline really just sucks the pleasure out of everything. And it becomes a hobby for money versus a hobby for pleasure.
Well, the thing is, whenever you monetize or turn something into a business, it changes your relationship with it, because it's now you're thinking about it differently. There's a different level of pressure. And I think in our culture in general, there's this pressure because of what it really comes down to is economics. So a lot of people are dependent on side hustles to make the money they need. And so because of that, our culture has said that any hobby that can be monetized needs to be monetized, or one, you're not taking it seriously, or two, you're wasting your time. So I think there's a cultural pressure to monetize every hobby. And in spirituality, it's even more pronounced, because we see if someone's a professional reader, we give them that status of legitimacy, right? Because for the longest time, when we think of status leaders in our community, we're talking about religious leaders, but also published authors. So we assume if someone's a professional, they must be better. So people think that to make their hobby good, they have to be a professional in it. And that's not true. I mean, spirituality does not exist to be sold. You can be one of the best readers around and not charge or not do it for other people. Doing it for other people doesn't inherently make you better, nor is it necessary for all people. I think the idea that we all have to do this certain thing when we get to a certain skill level is actually counterproductive and not helpful for our community, and leads to a lot of people doing professional readings they don't really want to do. and just kind of doing it because they think they have to, which is literally orthodoxy and why a lot of people join the occult, to escape orthodoxy.
I mean, once you get to a point where you're monetizing something that used to give you pleasure, you will eventually feel trapped. You will eventually feel trapped by what you're doing. You will feel stagnated by what you're doing. I don't care if you don't agree with me, that's just fact. It happens to writers, it happens to occultists, it happens to witches. It doesn't matter what service you're providing. At the point in which it becomes work, it becomes a labor. You no longer get that pleasure and enjoyment out of doing that thing. At some point, it's just going to feel like a job. And so there's there's that danger to, speeding the process. Are you doing this because it's part of your journey, it's the steps that you want to take? Are you doing it because you want the status that comes with it, or are you doing it because you feel pressured into it? Those are all different pathways that you have to navigate.
Well, the second there's pressure for you to do something that you enjoyed at any, like, in any realm, because some people think like, oh, it's because there's pressure from the audience of like what, or like the pressure from the clients. But also then there's also that pressure of like, okay, in senses of like, once you've created that to be your job, there's also pressure to do that because that's what's getting you your groceries, that's what's paying your bills, that's what's putting gas in your car. So like, I get a lot too of oh, like, you're burnt out, because I made a whole crisis video. I was like, oh my god, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I was like, you're burnt out, just take a break. And I'm like, I would love to, but I can't, because I have to pay my bills. Like, if I take, a few weeks off or a month off, like, I'm not getting paid at all. And I mean, like, I'm getting paid a little bit, but I'm gonna have to be like really, really careful with how I'm spending my money and like what I'm doing with my time afterwards, because my time now is my money. Like, what I do with it and the content that I create, I have to make sure will pay my bills. And that is so much pressure on top of hoping that your client / audience will like what you put out.
Not only that, it's also, if you take this break, let's say you had the money saved up to be able to take a month off,
Right.
let's say. There's also still, we circle back to the algorithm for creators and why there becomes additional pressure. Well, the algorithm punishes you. It really does.
True.
If you take a
Yeah.
month off, like, okay, maybe you could afford to take that month off. Can you afford the drop you're going to see in the monetary compensation, like from YouTube? YouTube will punish you in the algorithm.
Oh,
It'll get
yeah.
shown to less people. You'll make less money on the videos. It becomes this hard thing of, if I take a break, it's not just the money I'm missing during the break, it's the money I'm missing after the break when I come back and I'm
Like,
making content again.
you really have to claw your way back in.
And it's hard because if you want to take a break, you almost feel like you have to work yourself to death leading up to your break, which makes you need the break even more. And it just sucks because your options are take the hit or kill yourself trying to make enough content to fill in that gap.
Yeah, I mean, by the time that you're like, okay, I'm like starting to get burnt out, and then you're like, I need a break, you're going to have to put in minimum another 2 weeks of like balls to the wall working. Like, it's not just a regular work week for you anymore. If you want to take that break, you have to batch create for a whole other 2 weeks or even a whole month, depending on how your schedule works, and just hope to God that you'll be able to like schedule everything and then like maybe take your break. But you really don't know.
And it sucks so much joy from the creation process, because if you feel advanced enough to make content to teach, if you feel advanced enough to be able to put this information out there for people, it sucks all the joy out. Because I would think that we all enjoy teaching, we all enjoy educating, we all enjoy spreading information to other people and helping them along their own paths. But it goes from, I started my channel to help people, and because it made me happy to help people, to I'm stressed all the time, I need a break, I'm burnt out, I can't stop. And it goes from, I did this for fun, to this honestly sometimes makes me miserable.
Yeah.
And I don't think beginners quite understand that, because it when you're a beginner, you see everything through the rose-colored glasses and you want it to always be that bright, shiny new feeling. But when you force yourself into a professional or advanced role trying to teach people, that's when it just goes downhill.
Right.
Well, if you're creating 24/7 and talking about something 24/7, you're probably not going to want to do it as much. I mean, like, if you're talking about rituals 24/7, you're reading tarot people professionally, you're gonna lose the energy to read for yourself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've had like weeks where I always do my dailies. I will never miss those, even if I'm in a fucking ditch, right? I'll find a way to do them, okay? You have to hit me over the head with a shovel to make me stop.
Sure, this girl's in
But, like,
Florida doing them, like,
Getting attacked by my cat doing her dailies.
yeah, so like I'll do them. Nike can vouch for Nike's cat literally was biting my feet while I was doing my LPRPs. But like beyond that, like I've had certain weeks where I, especially like this past week, I made a lot more content than normal because I had to pre-film and pre-schedule posts for a couple days because I'm having a longtime friend visit town who is like an old family friend. And so I know I'm not going to be creating for those days. And I post daily on a lot of platforms. So like this week there was one ritual I had scheduled to do, and I was like, this isn't a daily, this isn't essential, I'm just gonna push it off, and I didn't do it, and I felt a lot of like guilt, you know. I was like, damn, I should have done that ritual. I know I've been up keeping my dailies and my offerings and stuff, but that ritual I really scheduled out. The timing was really particular, and I felt this like weird religious guilt about it. And I'm like, but I was just so burnt out, I just couldn't do it because I was just so busy and putting so much out. I was like, the last thing I want to think about is ritual work right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
but I mean,
And
like,
we don't
Yeah.
want this.
when
Sorry.
my father-in-law used to be like a landscaper, and I said to him more than once, like, because he always had these big plans what he wanted to do with his yard and stuff, and I was like, why don't you just do it? And he'd be like, when you do this all day, when you get home, it's not the thing you want to do. Like, you just want to relax, you want to break. You don't want to do more of what you do all the time, every day, all
Mm-hmm.
day. And it's true for us in this sphere. And it's not just as creators, right? It's not just content creators, and I can't stress that enough. If your work is spiritual or religious in nature, in any capacity, could be in real life, online, doesn't matter, you will feel that burnout on a personal level when you get home. At some point you're going to feel that burnout, and you have to determine whether doing this hinders or helps you, and in what ways you can move forward. Because at some point, there's going to be some point in your journey where you determine, in order to continue progressing on my journey, I have to step back from making it so publicly available. I have to make it
Right.
just for me.
And we don't want this to sound like we're just complaining about being creators. The reason we're trying to stress that so hard is because the whole reason we want to encourage more people to connect with their spirituality, to connect with religion in certain cases, like Thalim is a religion, Norse paganism, Hellenic paganism, whatever, to connect with this whole realm of what we do. We want them to enjoy it and for it to be a lifelong path. I always say that being a witch is being a lifelong student. We want people to enjoy it. And the fact is that pressuring yourself into being a creator, into being a professional, to being advanced sooner than you should be, quote unquote, it just burns people out and makes people not want to stick with it. People burn
Mhm.
out really hard because they're trying to hit advanced so quickly, because there's this pressure to be advanced for whatever reason you want to be advanced. Sometimes it's just for being able to have the status symbol of being advanced and feeling good about yourself, but that's how you burn yourself out and you lose all passion and drive for it, and you never touch it again because you set it down and you never want to touch it because you're so burnt out. You spend 80 hours a week trying to learn all these things and do all this stuff, and you're constantly doing rituals and constantly doing spells and constantly reading new books, and you just don't give yourself a break. And we want to help people prevent that burnout because it's so rough, and we want people to stick through it. We want people to stick around in this as a lifelong path, not just something you burn yourself through in 6 months, because it's difficult to set boundaries for yourself when there is societal pressure to be advanced.
And that's something I'd like to touch on more of, like, why is it so important for everybody to be advanced? Because if you were practicing as a form of self-improvement or manifestation just within your life, and you are at a point where you are confident that you can get the manifestations that you want or that you need, you feel as if you can communicate to whatever you're needing to communicate, whether that be your inner child, your higher self, your universe, whatever, deity, whatever. Why do you need to feel like, why does everybody need to feel advanced? If you were at a job that you were happy with, that it has nothing to do with your practice, there's really no reason to have that little fake badge of I'm advanced, I am superior to X, Y, and Z. Like there are I think it's funny too because historically people who did practice, they just practiced. That was just part of their lifestyle. That was just the way that they lived. It was ingrained in everything that they did of like cooking and gardening and sewing clothes together and just like little charms. It wasn't because they wanted to be super powerful. It was just because that was a part of the way that they lived their lives. So I think also taking into consideration of like being advanced doesn't get you anywhere unless that is like a huge part of your life and like where income is coming from and like where all of your community is coming from.
Just even then, it doesn't have to be a forever thing. You
Yeah.
don't have to be making content online for the rest of your life. I don't want to be a 70-year-old grandma making YouTube videos. It'd be kind of fun, be kind of cool, but I don't want to be just from now until then making content. There is a point for me personally. I eventually want to be able to not be making witchcraft YouTube videos. I want to be able to develop into something more. Maybe it looks like astrological readings. Maybe it looks like something else. Maybe it's photography. Who knows? But I don't make this with the intention of it being my lifelong thing, and I don't know that that's ever really mentioned.
This book called The Second Mountain, and by me bringing it up, I am not recommending it. I'm not co-opting it. I'm not telling you to go out and buy it. I'm genuinely not. But the premise of the book is kind of cool in that the book basically talks about how when you're going through something in life and you're working towards a goal, you work towards like the peak of the mountain, right? Like you think, okay, I'm just going to become advanced, and you work towards the top tippy peak of that mountain. And when you get to that mountain, you realize you're on a ridge line, and there's always going to be a bigger, better, higher goal that you now have to climb down and get up to that new goal. So, okay, so what? Now you're advanced. Now what? Now what's going to happen in your life? What did that change? And what are you working towards? Like, being advanced is a status symbol. People who are advanced typically don't need to go waving around their advanced dick all the time, being like, I'm so advanced, look at me. In some settings, it maybe makes sense. Like, maybe if you join online communities where they gauge, like, people self-gauge their skill level so that they can help like beginners, or that people can flag people who maybe know a little bit more. That makes sense in that setting. But to just be online, you really don't need to be waving that all around.
I think this is something, it's called Dunning-Kruger, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's where people so basically there's a slope of learning. It starts at the bottom when you know nothing, you know nothing, and you get way up to the peak, and you think you know everything. You think you're an expert, but then you realize you're not. You have what's called the Dunning-Kruger moment when you realize that you're not as advanced as you think you were, and then you fall into what's known as imposter syndrome.
Well, it's because you end up with you think you're super advanced, but by becoming to this point, you start to open up the doors into the rest of it, and you start realizing how much you don't know. That's why you hit the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. Same thing with astrology. Okay, cool. So you've learned all the houses, the planets, the signs, the aspects. You know those things. I'm so advanced. And then you start learning about like perfection years and solar returns and zodiacal releasing and all these different things, and you're suddenly like, oh God, I don't know anything at all. And then the imposter syndrome hits. That's why that happens.
The way that it goes a little further. You go up the slope, you hit your Dunning-Kruger moment, you fall into what's called the pit of despair, you realize you don't know as much as you thought you did. That's when imposter syndrome kicks in, and then you go up the slope of knowledge that's much slower, and you're actually learning, and you can actually gauge where you are. But before you can realistically gauge where you are, you have to have the Dunning-Kruger moment. It happens to everyone in all forms of life. And so this theory, I think, really applies to the advanced conversation, because I think a lot of people who self-identify as advanced are at the top of the slope, about to have their Dunning-Kruger moment, not on the eventual slope of knowledge after the pit of despair. I'm a big believer in this theory. It's the Dunning-Kruger imposter syndrome theory. If you ever heard the term imposter syndrome, this is what it's from.
And there's also, I want to talk a little bit about like social media branding, like branding your path to be on social media. And it's somewhat with the content creation, but it's also about some of that intermixing pressure of not just trying to be advanced, but trying to be advanced in a certain thing, so it sort of mixes in with like the witch type stuff. Do you guys want to talk about that?
I mean, when I came on the online scene, that was at like the peak height of like witch types, and I was like, what the fuck is a witch type? What kind of witch am I then?
Yeah,
And I was
yeah,
like,
it's there's
me and Olivia had many conversations. Like, what the fuck? Like, what kind of witch are we?
there's so much pressure to find your box and then stay in it, and that
Yeah.
irritates the fuck out of it. Like, I'm not a goddamn cat. I'm not gonna sit in a damn box all day. It's not a thing, and it made me mad because people would be like, "Oh, I'm a green witch," or I'm a fucking, I don't know, I'm a kitchen witch, whatever.
Yeah, hearth
And it's
Kitchen
witch.
witch, tarot witch, astro
I'm a
witch.
tarot witch. Yeah, exactly. And it's
Crystal
just like,
witch. That was one of the ones.
I have always been one of those people that's like jack of all trades. Like, I'm not gonna pick one, and it's totally chill if you have one that you love and that you keep and hold dearly to your life. But then I've seen people who are like, oh, well, I'm an astro witch, so like it's all about the stars and the zodiacs for me. So like I feel weird when I'm like trying to do kitchen witchery because like it's almost like I don't belong in the kitchen to do that, or like I don't belong in like the fields like identifying herbs because like I'm an astro witch. And it's like, no, being a witch is about having knowledge that other people don't. Like that's where a lot the term kind of came from, is just like somebody who knows the unknown knowledge. Yeah. And so it's so frustrating to see people limit themselves because of the whole like witch type.
Well, the witch type
thing.
makes sense if you're talking about like religious sector, right? Because if
Right.
someone were to be
Yeah.
like, oh, like I am Thelemic, or I am a heathen, or I am a Celtic pagan, or whatever it is that they're saying that they are, that makes sense because you're describing your religion. But witchcraft as a practice goes so much deeper or broader. Just because I self-describe as a folk witch doesn't mean that I couldn't learn ceremonial magic, doesn't mean that I couldn't learn astro signs, although I'm not going to, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't. It's just very self-limiting.
I think that online, even a religion can be limiting because let's say you grow as a practitioner and you change religions, because it happens a lot. A lot of people will change their religion as they get deeper into the occult. What then? Like, if you are a creator and at some point in time you have a major path shift and you like have a complete pivot in your practice. Like when I was really new, I was originally into folk magic and I had this like 180 pivot into ceremonial magic. That happened years before I was a creator. But let's say something like that happens while you're a creator. Like the internet will fucking lose its shit on you.
Yeah.
You'll be seen as a grifter. You'll be ostracized. You'll lose your sense of community and all your status will fall away. And I think that is really bad for growth, because what if someone's natural path does a 180?
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the problems with social media and the internet, because that could really damage someone online. But by not taking that pivot, they damage their practice. And so it becomes this like damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
I mean, I can like connect it. I'm going to connect it to pole dancing because that's the only other thing that gives me life on this planet. It's like it. A lot of people see it with the stripper style, but that's not the only thing that, like, oh, I do a lot of stripper style. I personally do, but there's also people who put a lot of contemporary and ballet into it. There's other people who do it mainly just for sport, so it's just trick based, and there's not really like dance
Exotic
involved
Russian.
in it. Yeah, there's exotic Russian. Like, so it's like, if I'm like a well-known pole dancer who does only trick-based stuff, and I'm actually really close to the sport community as well. But then all of a sudden, if I'm like, wow, I really like exotic Russian, or I really like stripper style, and I start doing that instead of just the trick-based, my community would lose their shit because they'd be like, what the hell? This isn't sports. This isn't, trick-based, whatever. Like, they'd freak out because they're two totally different things, because I put myself in that box of like, well, I'm a sport polar. I'm a trick-based person. Like, it just kind of upsets me that people can't experiment freely without getting kind of like demonized if they put everything online anyway. So that's another thing about being a beginner and figuring out your stuff and then trying to put it all online.
Okay, so my final thoughts are that in the end, your practice is for you. Who the fuck cares what the internet says or what the other people in your community mean? Because in the end, it's about your will and it's about your connection to the divine. So all this shit doesn't really matter. It's what matters to you. If becoming a teacher, becoming a creator is part of your path organically, do it. But if it's not what you feel called toward, it's not what spirit wants for you, it's not what your life wants for you, don't do it. Do what your will says. In Thelema, we have this concept of will, where every person has an individual sort of life path that they're meant to follow. And the whole point of mysticism is to connect to the divine so you can understand what that is and conceptualize that and then live your life in alignment to that. And that will be the way that brings you joy. So ask yourself this question: is becoming a creator, is making my practice even public, is telling people in my lives, is becoming a teacher, is that in line with my will? Is that part of my will? Is that what is going to fulfill me? Or is it only going to leave me burned out and leave me thinking, hey, maybe I should have just not. Maybe I should have just done this on my own. What will bring you more joy? Will having your rituals by yourself or with your coven and that's it be the thing that's best for your spiritual development? Or do you feel that call to teach? It's what is right for you. Do not do what you think you should do or what you prescriptively believe is the sign of being advanced, whatever the fuck advanced means. There's no uniform definition of that, okay? Do what is right for you and what is in line with your will, because that is the thing that actually matters.
Way to take all the points, Georgina.
Yeah, fuck you, Georgina.
My final thoughts are that there's no need to be advanced. I mean, obviously, and I think that we forget to enjoy ourselves along the road. We're supposed to enjoy the process of learning. We're supposed to enjoy diving deep into these things. And when you're trying to push yourself towards advanced or push yourself towards content creation or push yourself towards teaching, you lose the joy in it. So if you feel like you're hitting some of this, if you feel all this pressure to be a teacher, be a creator, to be advanced, try to take a step back and just maybe even disconnect from online, unplug a little bit, and try to get back to your roots of why you like it in the first place, what drew you to it, and enjoying that process all over again. It's good to unplug. I did it. I took a 2 or 3 week break from the major parts of my social media recently because I was feeling that way. So take a step back. Don't be afraid. It's okay. You're allowed to just take care of you.
My final thoughts are, if you're thinking about creating a social media account to be an online public occultist or witch, maybe don't. But if you really want to, go ahead and do it.
I was kind of going to say the same thing. Look, don't do it. Like,
wow!
Do it, but don't do it.
Do it, but don't. But don't.
Yeah, like, no.
It's not like the table's not big enough. It's just like...
Yeah, it's not saying that we don't want you here. We're, like, it's more of saying you have to want to be here.
You have to want to be here because it's a lot of work.
It's so much fucking work, and I can tell you that I have never wanted to... I have never drank more in my life. I'm just saying that now. I'm fine, you guys. I literally never... I can't. It's so funny.
You give your soul to the internet, and
I literally... Yeah, you give your soul...
You do.
I'm telling you, like...
more doing witchcraft stuff. Listen, I've got ADHD. Working a lot is not what my brain likes to do. I work so many hours these days, and it often makes me very unhappy.
People do not believe me when I tell them that I easily work 60 hours a week.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, you lose so much of, like, actual interaction because you're interacting with other people that you don't even know. You're worrying about comments, you're worrying about replying to people, you're worrying about emails and schedules and all this bullshit that doesn't actually matter in the end. I mean, it matters, but, like, not to the point of, like, you hanging out with your friends and then being like, can you shut it off? And you're like, I cannot, because this is my life. So it's just more of, like, you have to want to be here. And a lot of people think they do, and then once they kind of get here, they don't. So keeping that in mind, also being advanced is subjective and, like, doesn't actually matter for the most part for most practitioners. And I don't know, if you are happy with your practice, it's all that matters. It doesn't matter whatever other people want from you.
So you can support Magnolias and Magic through our Patreon. You get extended shows, video versions, and pre-shows, and you can find me Georgina Rose, .darling on every major social media platform excluding Facebook.
You can see every week when I've forgotten to pull up the patrons, so allow me one moment while I pull up the Patreon. I mean, I definitely already had it up and knew this was coming because we do it every single week. I definitely knew to do that, for sure. Patrons, you're super cool, and if you are a $10 tier or up, which we just renamed recently, by the way, they're very cute. The tier and orders are seed, sprout, bud, and blossom. So if you are a bud or a blossom tier, we get to thank you by name on the podcast, and that's pretty rad. So I would like to say a big thank you to, if I scroll all the way down, Victoria, Rose, Ree, Nicole, Nico, Neon, Nauseated, Mike, Megan, Marshall. I love Marshall. Lisa, Lee, Kat, Jessica, Doitsu, The Rising Witch, Jonah, Janine, Jay, Evan, Barry, and Amy Momster. Thanks to all you guys. If you want to follow me, you can find me at Warrior Witch Nike pretty much everywhere. I'm pretty cool. I do like blog posts here and there when I can remember to do it. I do YouTube, and I'm on Twitter being chaotic as always. And Twitch, we do Twitch, me and Georgina, Mondays and Tuesdays. So follow us everywhere.
I'm Temperance. You can find me at Wildwoman Witchcraft, like everywhere, or Tempura Apples on Twitch. My book, Year of the Witch, is available everywhere books are sold, and I think it's good, so you should too.
Georgina? Oh, me.
Yes,
It's me.
you. It's your time.
Sorry, I didn't know what. I am Olivia. I am the Witch of Wonderlust pretty much everywhere except for TikTok because that one person stole my thing. So I am the Wonderlust Witch there. Other than that, that's it. That's all I've got.
And you've been listening to Magnolias and Magic.